I like to start with my earliest memories being memories of being absolutely happy, that truly joy, happiness, connection, openness, that's what it means to be human. And through a series of events and some traumatic experiences, I closed my heart. I literally felt like a wall went around my heart when I was 7 years old. I decided I wasn't smart. I also decided I was unlovable and unworthy, and drinking started at pretty young for me, around 14, but ultimately kind of turned on me. I just remember feeling so lost, David, and just trying so desperately to plug into anyone or anything to feel whole and complete. I was really not knowing if I wanted to stay on the planet, quite frankly. And I heard them saying we were born whole and complete, and that's still who and what we are. That belief in my own brokenness was creating what I call reality. And when I said yes to that, everything collapsed and the doorway opened, and that's when I went back to school.
At 7 years old, TJ Woodward remembers closing his heart. And by 14, alcohol became a way to cope. And by 20, sobriety opened the door to a deeper spiritual understanding. And by the age of 40, he returned to an inner calling, not just to help people get sober, but to help them experience a truly healthy, awakened life. Today, TJ is the author of Conscious Creation: 5 Steps to Embracing the Life of Your Dreams. He guides people to remember their true identity as whole, complete, and loved. And this process is radically different than the manifesting that you may be accustomed to. In this episode, you'll learn how to use his 5-step framework to consciously create your life while living from what he calls mystic consciousness. I'm your host, David Trotter. Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast. TJ, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you, David. I'm looking forward to our conversation and happy to be here.
Yeah, you have a very interesting journey and have developed a lot of wisdom and experience in addiction recovery, speaking, helping people with mental health challenges. And I'm always curious about the motivation behind that, the trajectory, right? The path that came before making some of those decisions to invest your life in others in that way. So maybe if you could just start by sharing a little bit about your story and how that led you to helping others in these ways.
Well, yeah. Do we have about 3 hours? Because
Let's
that's
do
how
it.
long
I want to hear it.
it takes to tell the story. So I'll give some highlights, right? I mean, I like to start with my earliest memories being memories of being absolutely happy, joy-filled, in awe of the world. And the reason I start with that is, in my experience, the long journey I've had, I've come to realize that that's innate in the human experience, that truly joy, happiness, connection, openness, that's what it means to be human. And I was born on this place called planet Earth, and through a series of events and some traumatic experiences, I closed my heart. And I actually remember this moment, David, where I literally felt like a wall went around my heart when I was 7 years old. And I look at that now and I can see that that was a protection that felt like it was coming in from outside of me. And of course, it worked to a degree, but it also protected me from the love and connection I truly desired. So,
Not that we need to go into it, but I assume that was some sort of traumatic experience that caused that.
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to go into it. There were a lot of different things happening. One, my parents were in a loveless marriage. I know that now. My dad was told he would marry my mom by someone in our church, and that's really interesting. And they stayed together for 20 years. There were a lot of addiction issues on my dad's side, not substance use, interestingly enough, but around sex and sexuality, which caused me to be very afraid. Very afraid of men, very afraid of like becoming an adult, so many layers. And also being in Indiana and, realizing at a very young age that I liked boys, not girls, in a particular way. And that was sort of accepted in my home. But then when I went to school, it wasn't so accepted. So there were a lot of different things happening. There wasn't just one event.
So as you continued to grow up, you went to high school, college, what were the things that you were interested in?
Well, it's interesting. I actually didn't go to college right away. And that's part of my story, because at that age of 7, I decided some huge things about myself. And one of them was that somehow I decided I wasn't smart. And I also decided I was unlovable and unworthy. And I remember when my nephew turned 7, I looked at him and thought, oh my gosh, he's just this innocent child. And that was the year I decided, the age I decided that I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough. So high school was an interesting journey for me. Drinking started at pretty young for me, around 14, and really did help me actually in the beginning, but ultimately kind of turned on me. I got sober at 20 years old, but that high school and then right after high school was a pretty difficult time in my life.
So instead of going to college, you entered the workforce, or what did you pursue?
I did. Well, I pursued drugs. That was a lot of it, but I did jump right into working. I actually left my home when I was 17 and it was on my own, and that came with a lot of different layers, I'll put it that way. And I just remember feeling so lost, David, and just trying so desperately to plug into anyone or anything to feel whole and complete. And that was a big part of my journey that ultimately led me to getting sober just before I turned 21. And that's really where my spiritual journey began.
Through your sobriety, was it through AA or just quitting cold turkey, or what was that process like for you?
I did go to 12-step programs back in those years, and they really saved my life. It was something that really turned my life around in the beginning, especially because it was just so nice to have community, so nice to have authentic connection. And ultimately, I met a woman there named Mary Helen who became my mentor. And she was this beautifully, spiritually alive and awakened human being who took me, quite frankly, on a journey of deeper healing.
Mhm. Did you, enter into, like, a Christian faith path? Was that part of your upbringing, or were there other ways that you were exposed to spirituality?
Well, it's interesting. I am so grateful for the way I grew up. I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I grew up singing in a very traditional men and boys choir. I went to England and sang for the Archbishop of Canterbury, like this beautiful experience. So, my religious experience, I hear a lot of people, especially in the LGBTQ community, talk about the trauma they experienced around religion. I don't have that, and I'm very grateful. When I got sober and when I was introduced to Mary Helen, I went on a journey that was really different than that. I discovered new thought communities. I went to India on a spiritual journey. I started really exploring Eastern thought. So I was really looking at a lot of different types of spirituality, not as much religion, but some of that as well, just kind of dabbling in and seeing what fit for me.
I know that ultimately you have become, an ordained minister through Agape, with Michael Beckwith, and my understanding that would be in the new thought category, right? Okay. So help people who maybe aren't familiar with that term or that way of thinking of the world or connecting with the divine. What is new thought? How would you define that?
Yeah, so New Thought is a movement that started in the late 1800s, and it was sort of springing from this existentialist movement that was happening, and a lot of things were happening in consciousness then, and a few different organizations or groups sprung from that. Unity, now what we call Centers for Spiritual Living. I think their original name was Church of Religious Science. And like Unity, for example, which was the first place I went, really was kind of a bridge to from Christianity into kind of more of a new thought. And what does new thought mean? New thought, essentially, the fundamental teaching is that there is one power and one presence in our life, God the good, that there is that power, and that power is who and what we are, that we're all sparks of divinity. Now, a lot of different movements have sprung from that, including Agape in the 1980s with Michael Beckwith. So that's kind of the origin story of New Thought.
Mhm. What was it about that I don't know, just like pulled you in or felt like, okay, yeah, this is my path. This is what resonates with me the most.
Such a great question. And it's so important for me to even remind myself. As I said, I felt so broken and damaged. And when I got sober and met Mary Helen around 18 months sober, I was really not knowing if I wanted to stay on the planet, quite frankly, to be really honest. And it's because I felt so broken and so damaged. I had so much shame, and I was using anything outside of myself to try to like assuage that or to fix what felt broken within. So when I walked into a Unity in 1988 or 89 and I heard them saying we were born whole and complete and that's still who and what we are, that just resonated so deeply because I felt so broken, and there was a part of me that understood that belief in my own brokenness was creating what I call reality. And so unity is saying we create our reality based on our thoughts, but based on our point of view. And the deeper awareness for me is based on that frequency I'm holding about myself, which quite frankly was really painful for me in those years. So I found that, I heard that, and I felt like I had come home.
Hmm. Contrast for me the feelings or experience of having a shame as a way of experiencing living life. Like, describe that to me, and then describe to me what does it feel like, or experience, or what's the experience like of going, no, 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 actually, not broken, I'm whole. Like, contrast those, compare and contrast those for me.
Oh, I love that question. I mean, it's just night and day, right? So I didn't realize at the time, and I could not have articulated this at the time, but the shame core was a vibration. So I was walking around not only believing that I was damaged or broken, but really that was the frequency at which I was vibrating in the world. So I found myself saying things like, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep choosing these relationships? Why? There's a lot of whys, right? I was in that wise not being wise, but asking a lot of whys. And the journey to wholeness was not an event but a process for me, and it's just completely different to understand that I came into the world as an infinite being, and that's still who and what I am. And recovery or a spiritual journey, whether we find that in therapy or however we find support, it's about returning to that. It's about unlearning all the ideas and beliefs that we've picked up about ourselves. But really, it's frequency. And that's the best way I can describe it.
And so then when I'm entering into life, my job, my relationships, partnerships, money, from a perspective of I am a whole being, I'm loved. What is the difference? Like, what is the result of that that's so different?
Well, everything's different then. I know in our culture, we talk a lot about the law of attraction, right? We talk about like deciding what we want and then holding that frequency, and then that attracts things to support that. And although that is true on one level, there's something much deeper happening, and that is, if I believe I'm broken, that frequency causes me to continue to choose that unconsciously over and over again. When I begin to do the work of unlearning and returning to my true nature, that vibration creates a different reality. It's not so much what gets attracted, but the choices I'm able to make. I remember someone said to me once, and I was not happy about this, but they said, if someone showed up and was completely ready to love you, you would probably reject them. And I remember feeling so offended by that. But looking back now, of course, there were people who wanted to offer me love, but it wasn't congruent with my vibration. So when I'm aware of the infinite being that I am, and that spiritual sense, that effervescence, that true nature is who I am, I'm naturally choosing things to support that belief. So we hear people say, hurt people hurt people. Well, healed people heal people. And so changing that, tuning into that frequency, it's not really changing the frequency, but tuning into it changes everything.
So at what point did you decide, okay, I want to start helping others? Like, I want to, now people have helped me. I want to start helping, because obviously you're helping so many people now in these different ways, which we'll get into. But what was that moment or that shift?
Well, thank you. And this is it's actually a very profound question, because in the material world, if you will, it didn't shift until I was 40. And Carl Jung says we spend the first half of our life developing a healthy ego and the second half dismantling it. So I don't know if 40 is half, but it's, somewhere in that range. And that's when everything kind of collapsed and fell apart, when I had a calling to do spiritual work. But the truth is, I had the desire really early. In part of my journey, I went back and read some old journals. And when I was in my early 20s, I remember I saw that I wrote, if I could do anything, it would be help people awaken spiritually and move beyond their addiction. That was when I was in my early 20s. Fast forward until I was 40, and I was attending a Unity at the time in San Francisco. I was active on the board. I was very active in that community. And I just started having the inner knowing that I not only wanted to be a spiritual teacher in some way, but that was my calling. And when I said yes to that, everything collapsed and the doorway opened. And that's when I went back to school.
Everything collapsed. What do you mean everything collapsed?
I mean everything. So there's a term in New Thought called chemicalization. Chemicalization is when we have a divine idea or a call to a higher level of consciousness, and then everything unlike it gets dismantled. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think everyone needs to have the experience I did, but I'll just be really transparent. My ego was still holding on to so tightly the life I had built. I had a business. I had the nice house, the car, the partner. I had everything on the outside that I thought I wanted that would make me happy. And yet I had this deeper, is this all there is? There's something more. And when I said yes to that, and when I decided to go back to school at Unity Institute to become whatever this was going to look like, a minister, a spiritual teacher, an author, I didn't know, everything that was unlike it collapsed. So I lost the business, the partner, the house, the car, and I've reached a point sometime around 40 where I had an opportunity to live in a very different way.
My goodness. Uh, you have written a book and developed a methodology called conscious recovery. And so, want to point people toward that on your website, of course. But today, specifically, because we're getting ready to enter into the new year, I wanted to dive into your book. I want to get the title right here: Conscious Creation, 5 Steps to Embracing the Life of Your Dreams. And so, I want to hear, what is conscious creation and how is that perhaps different than what we would call manifesting?
Yeah, I love this. So it is, on in the first of the year. I mean, we do this all the time, but the first of the year, collectively, we agree we're going to make New Year's resolutions. And in my experience, both in my own journey and then working with clients and working with people in spiritual community for many, many years, most people, or quite often, I'll put it that way, quite often people want to start with the intention setting piece. Let me figure out what I want to create, set the goals, set the intention. We do the vision boards. And I've discovered something that's very simple. And it kind of goes back to my own story of the collapse. Conscious creation is really different than that. Conscious creation, in my experience, is moving from unconscious creation to conscious creation. And as we discussed, when we have these unconscious ideas and beliefs, they are running the show. And so, no matter how much work we do in our mind, change our thinking, change our life, we've heard that, do the vision boards, practice the law of attraction, ultimately the unconscious beliefs and ideas that's really what creates reality. So I've created a 5-step process. I use the acronym MOVIE, MOVIE, because we are creating a new movie for our life. But the first couple of steps are what I call clearing steps, so that we can start to consciously create, not from our old limited programming.
And so, would you say that manifesting, like the difference between conscious creation and manifesting, is that we kind of start with more the intention or goal setting? That's the starting step for most people with manifesting.
I think it is, yes, without
Mhm.
wanting to do some of that, and maybe it's not wanting to do, but maybe not aware of the importance of doing the deeper work. So I can do the vision board, I can, do affirmations, I
Mhm.
can check into my frequency and change my thoughts, and I can manifest some things
Mhm.
there. But my model really is inviting us to go deeper. So it's about getting clear. There's a couple things at play. One is being able to get in touch with what my deeper desire is from an intuitive level, which we get to later in the steps. But first and most importantly, and I'll use a different metaphor, if I'm trying to paint a new portrait for my life, if I'm just painting over the same old portrait, it eventually seeps through. So we need to first have a blank canvas.
Mhm. I want to talk about real briefly before we go into those 5 steps with the MOVIE. I'm very fascinated by that. Is you write about in the introduction 4 levels of consciousness and how those impact our lives. And I loved that section with those 4 levels. Would you mind just walking us through those 4 real quick?
Yeah, and I'm gonna actually tell a story. The first time I ever spoke at a New Thought Center, I think it was in 2007 or 8, I'm guessing. My talk was called Beyond Metaphysics. And at the end of the talk, someone said, "Do you know who Michael Beckwith is? Your framework sounds very similar to his." And the reason that I start with that is consciousness is an amazing thing. We tap into these ideas and it does turn out. I created these 4 levels of consciousness. Turns out it's very similar to what Michael had, and I hadn't ever met him at that time. So I want to say that because I think it's fascinating to me. But I've given the 4 levels of consciousness all words that start with M So it's martyr, and martyr is things happen to me. Magical thinking, I make things happen. Metaphysical, things happen through me or I let things happen. And then
That's the top of the ladder for most people,
that's the
right?
top of the letter for most people. And
Yeah,
that's why
yeah,
the
yeah.
book was beyond metaphysics. And that was moving us into the mystical realm, which is things happen as me.
Okay, so the martyr, just break these because these are very, very helpful to go, where am I in this process? The martyr, say that again, is things are happening to me,
Yeah.
right? So, and that's the shift that a lot of people are trying to make is things are happening for me, not to me, right?
Yes.
So a lot of people want to make that shift, of course, and that's helpful. That's almost really somebody who's unconscious, who's not awakened. Why is this happening? What's going on in the world? Okay, the second one was
I call it magical thinking. I make things happen.
yes. So I'm embracing my power. I'm a powerful individual. I've got the divine power. That's good. Like that's helpful. It's a good
I'm
next
a
step.
creator of my own reality. That's where
Yes.
affirmations come in. That's where those vision boards come in. That's when we become aware of our thinking. And I do want to be clear about one thing. We don't graduate these levels permanently. At any moment, I can just dip into any one of them. And I think there are three steps to it: awareness, awareness, and awareness. So if I get hooked, like, I'm scrolling and I see a news story and I find myself back in that, like, oh, the world's happening to me. I catch myself, I take a breath, and then I remind myself of a different possibility, right? So I want to be clear too that, like, there's nothing better about being 72 than about being 26 or being 12. They're different stages of life. All of these are possibilities that at any moment we can tap into. So I wanted to offer that because sometimes people hear is like, oh, it's bad if I'm in the martyr level of consciousness. It's not bad, but we do know what it creates if I believe the world's happening to me.
Yes. Yeah. I do think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about your book is it felt like it was very permission giving for wherever I am. Like it's okay. Like this is where you are, but raise your awareness of it. Do you still want to be there? Is there another possibility that could be more helpful for your life? And I think your perspective on these levels of consciousness, it's so hard too, because I know your footnote was like steps versus levels, right, of consciousness. There does feel like a hierarchy in all of it. It's a linear path, and it's hard to get away from that. Okay, so first martyr, second was magical, third was metaphysical,
Yeah.
which means
Means things happen through me. So I also think about it in terms of one concept that I really like to work with is the four rooms of existence: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. I use the acronym PIES, like it's a slice of the pie. At that first level, we're mostly in the physical, right? So the world's happening to me. What I can see is reality. I'm more in touch with things are happening in my body. When I move into magical thinking, I move into the mind. I start to notice my thinking. I start to change my thoughts. I start to use affirmations. I start to try to change that thinking. And then this next level is more in the emotional. If we're going to talk about a higher power or God or source, we're going to say things about like, God is working through me. Source is working through me. I'm channeling. Channeling is a big part of metaphysical. It's a beautiful phase. And like you said, that's where I'm guessing, especially your audience, a lot of people are already in that metaphysical piece.
mhm,
This is where we're using a lot of things like runes or like cards,
mhm,
crystals,
mhm,
all beautiful and wonderful.
mhm,
And that's still that channel energy, that things happening through me. But there's obviously a higher or more
mhm.
awakened level that is that
Which is
mystical.
okay. And just go into that for just a second. I want to feel that.
Yeah, things happen as me. That's the place where we start to realize that our primary focus is spirit. So we realize that we're no longer spiritual beings having a human experience, but we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. Where that to recognize that it's all spiritual and all happening for my highest evolution and possibility. There is no separation between me and another person, nor is there any idea of a God that's up there and out there. It's all we're all part of that. We're all one, literally, that we are all a spark of divinity. And that is very different than there's this source that I need to learn to channel.
That doesn't feel very motivational to me, TJ.
Tell me
Like the
more.
the martyr, because the martyr is like, okay, well, it's against me. I got to fight. Like, I got to
Yeah,
somehow,
yeah,
I
yeah.
got to, right? Or the magical is like, ooh, look at this. Look at what I can do,
That's
And the
right.
metaphysical is like, God likes me. Look, God's doing things through me, Those
That's
all
right.
feel very action oriented. The things happen as me doesn't feels like I'm just sitting there now.
You are so smart, David, and you are asking the best questions because I agree wholeheartedly. What is the motivation? And I will speak to it in my own journey, not so much in theory, but in my own journey. Because as I tap into that level, I realize I cease fighting anything. I'm no longer against. I'm actually no longer for either. So it's a place of a lot of disorientation in a way. It's like, oh my gosh, everything is perfect as it is. Now that gets pushed back by people. Push back on that. It's like, what do you mean? There's starvation happening in the world. There's these political figures who are trying to cause me harm. There's all these things. So simply said, when I arrive at the mystical level of consciousness, there is nothing to do. And that can be really disorienting for some of us who have been very action focused. What there is, though, is a depth of awareness and curiosity and love that is so much greater than anything that I could personally create. And that's really the reason I start conscious creation with that is when we're creating from the mystical level, it looks really different than when we are from the other levels.
And so we'll get into these 5 steps in a moment, but I'm just curious that if I'm operating on the mystical level as a conscious leader, healer, coach, business owner, how does that translate into my way of operating, my way of like, okay, if we're all one, if I'm feeling this energetic connection to everything, how am I motivated to take action? Like, what does that look like?
It's so I love these questions. It's so great. And I also want to acknowledge most people don't really dive in the way you are. So I just really appreciate that you're taking us there because it's really important. Because it's in this stage of awareness, we can only speak in paradox. It's like it's this and it's that. There's nothing to do, and yet I'm called. And so let's look at it through the lens of, let's say, a counselor, whether you're a spiritual counselor, a therapist, or a coach. The other models would be we're here to provide answers in some way for our clients. We're here to ask the right questions. We're here to provide guidance and a framework for them. At this mystical level, we understand at a very deep level that the answers are deep within them, the other person, that I'm not here to do anything, but I'm here to be something. I'm here to see a higher possibility for the person sitting in front of me. And that can feel really intangible for someone. But the truth is, it's completely life changing. I'll go back to my own story. Mary Helen, who was my mentor, yes, she taught me some things. Yes, we did a lot of trauma healing. We did empty chair work with my parents. We did that work. Ultimately, though, she saw something in me. She saw the divine spark within me. And because she saw me as that, I started to see that for myself. And that's really what quantum mechanics is showing us now. And we're living in exciting times because science and spirituality are starting to come together with a very similar conclusion. And so, as a coach or a counselor or a therapist, we're not here to do anything, but to be something with the person sitting in front of us, and their journey is a journey of self-discovery.
Fascinating, fascinating. This is so rich. I think about my own journey for a moment because I am a doer. I mean, I have created all kinds of stuff. I mean, I just like creating stuff, and all with purpose and clear motivation. But recently, I have been going to a regression therapy facilitator that helps people go into past lives and all sorts of different things. And I was doing that to navigate some things with my father, who's having some cognitive decline, and
Mm.
just me processing that. And a couple sessions in, I started channeling. I had started channeling in a way that I had only done under the influence of medicine.
Yeah.
And it's coming through powerfully, TJ. And one of the things that kept coming through, talking about my life in third person, people think it's my higher self. It's crazy demonstrative. It's like Jim Carrey. I mean, if I showed you the video, you would be laughing out loud. It kept telling me over and over that the most important thing was my presence. My presence was the most important thing in the work that we're doing with Awaken Magazine, with Awaken Lifestyle Expo, with the books, is my presence. And I'm like, okay, I don't understand this. You're right.
Yes.
And what you're saying is just like a mirror for that. It's like the being, right? The being, and that somehow is obviously there's action. I love the paradox. So go back to the paradox for a moment. There's nothing for me to do, and yet I feel called to do so many different things. How would a leader live in that paradox? What does that look like day to day?
Well, this is really where we get into, and I know we're going to talk about the 5 steps, but we're going to create in a really different way because you named it so perfectly. When I am completely present, and what I don't mean by presence is being in the moment. Being in the moment is part of being in the presence, but the presence with a capital P, if you will, is tapping into this frequency, this source energy that we are. And when I feel that and I tap into that, that presence is not only healing, it's transformational. And when we're in the presence, I remember in my early to mid 20s, I met Amma, Amritananda Maya in southern India, the hugging saint, the hugging guru.
Okay. Okay.
Her presence, I walked into the room, and this was, many years ago and earlier in my journey. The presence that I felt from her, I broke down crying. It felt like years of trauma were being melted away. And that was simply through that presence. And so, what you're speaking to is it can be complex for our human mind to understand because many of us, like you said, have been programmed that it's all about the doing. And even getting a divine idea for our life, we might come in and say, I know how I need to do that. But that beingness is something completely different. And in some ways, it's intangible because it's like, well, how do you be in that? Right. And yet, when we feel it, when I feel it, there is nothing like it. There is no drug, there is no medicine. It's interesting that you say this about medicine because someone read my book Conscious Recovery and said, where did you do your plant medicine? And I said, I haven't ever done plant medicine. And he said, well, how on earth did you come to all of this? Because this is what I received in my journeys, what you're writing about. And so yes, those, the medicines can be really helpful. Ultimately, though, what the medicines can provide is that ability to be fully present because our ego self is kind of stripped away for a moment. I had an experience in India that radically changed my life because I had the experience momentarily of my ego being stripped away.
Hmm. It's interesting when I think about we talk about someone's presence, like this woman. Part of me, the analyzer part of me goes, well, TJ had a high level of expectation coming in. Everybody was, she's been branded this way. Everybody else has a high level of expectation. And so, because of that expectation, it creates the emotive experience, right? The analyzer part of me. The other part of me that once I experience something like that, I'm like, yeah, no, that's bullshit. Like, it actually is like,
Well,
it's the actual presence.
and you know what? They're both true. and that's maybe that paradox. Yeah, I did think that, but I also didn't really know what I was walking into, and I could feel it like a wave when I walked in. And it wasn't even necessarily from her, although she was holding the space in the room. It was everyone else being in that presence and that collective consciousness that really created that vibration. And I remember when I went to India in 1992 to stay in her ashram because I met her earlier than that. But when I went to stay in her ashram in southern India in 1992, when I walked into the ashram, that same wave of love hit me. But here's something interesting, David. I was in a very different place. I repelled from that. It was way too intense for me at that time in my journey. Now, I had already had the experience of being with her and just feeling myself like open and melt away, but I was in some sort of a different place and everything in me recoiled from that kind of direct love. And what I know, I mean, I can look back now in retrospect and say, yeah, there was just a lot that I hadn't healed yet. So I couldn't accept that level of presence at that time. And so I ended up staying in that ashram for about 4 or 5 days because I couldn't get out, basically. But everything in me was trying to escape from that pure love.
Hmm. My partner Mandy and I have talked about people who are celebrities having this magnetic presence. And I have wondered, is this part of nature or is it part nurture? Is it a little bit of both? Where you just have, there's this magnetism to someone that is unlike other people. And I think the question is, in that magnetism, what is being radiated, right? Is the radiation an attraction about me? Hey, look at me. I'm amazing, right? Like that can be very magnetic, but then you can also feel a magnetism. And I felt that the moment we got on, wow, I even feel emotional, a little emotional. Like you have that magnetism. But it is not a magnetism about you. It does not feel that way. It feels like, nope, you are wanting to embody, to be love, right? To be grace and to show people a different framework of thinking about life, recovery, mental health, and so forth. So you have that. I can feel that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And what I want to say is we all have that.
Mm,
The difference is, can I allow it to be? And I love that you
yes.
use the term radiation because and also Michael Beckwith uses this same term. Once again, we kind of came to this, but we shift from the law of attraction to the law of radiance. And the law of radiance is to know that each of us is magnetic because we're all and part of isn't even right because that implies separation, but we're all this energy. And many of us, I'll put it in my own journey. My own journey was I was afraid, so I closed my heart. So I was afraid to actually be that radiance. And I was taught to not be that radiance and to stay small. And I believed I was broken. So as I've healed enough of that, and I just say enough because there's no finish line, there's more. There's another layer of defense that I can release so that I can be this basically what you're saying. We all are that. That's our
Yes.
true nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize until 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, that my heart was closed. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking in the language that I talk. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. I realized 4 or 5 years ago, "Man, my heart's closed. I can't. I've got all these people telling me that they love me, and I'm thinking, why? I don't know why you love me. Like, I don't like. There's nothing to love. Like, what's
Let me tell you all the reasons you shouldn't.
right? I mean, I've got tons of reasons why you shouldn't be loving me. So I think you're either lying or you're just delusional. Like you just don't get it, right? And frankly, that's what ended my marriage, is because I just could not receive her love. Like she loved me. She's a saint. And I just couldn't receive it. And this was 4 years or so ago, 4 or 5. And I then came through a process, and medicine was very helpful. And I was on antidepressants for 15 years. And I decided, oh, I want to get off of these antidepressants because they're reducing my ability to feel. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get off these and I'm going to feel love. And I got off them and I felt like shit. Like I felt horrible. And I went through this dark night, right? Of going, oh, I'm anxious, I'm lonely, I'm afraid, I'm insecure, all of it. And so anyway, the point is, now having gone through that process, my heart is more open than it's ever been, right? And it feels so life giving.
And you're speaking to something that I think is so important and we don't often talk about. And I say we, I'm talking about like people sort of in the awakened spiritual world. We might not talk about the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is such an important part. I actually gave a talk on winter solstice talking about in the northern hemisphere, it's the longest night of the year, right? So the metaphor with that is that many times we'll say, well, now we're returning to the light. But there's something so rich in embracing that darkness as well. And my own journey, around that time, 40, when everything fell apart and I was in school and it ended up in this like legal mess. And I decided that I'm going to take the hit for something instead of blame someone else. And it was a big thing. And there was a 72-hour period, David, where I knew that if I did not close my curtains and have the dark night soul experience, I wasn't going to be able to consciously create my life. And it was really in that moment these 5 steps were born. And when I say moment, it was that 72-hour period. I turned off my phone, I unplugged my computer, I closed my curtains. And I don't know what year this was. It was somewhere around 2006 or 7. So I would have been, 19, it would have been like 41 or 42, but I had already gone back to school and I already lost everything. So I was in my tiny little apartment, right? And I was like, okay, I am going to choose to go into the dark night of the soul experience. And it really was me in the fetal position, sobbing and just feeling all of this energy moving through me. And it did culminate in this experience I had in India, which I really do want to share about if that's okay,
Yeah,
because
go for it. Yeah.
went to India, and I believe it was 2005. I think 2005. I'd gone on a spiritual journey, and that was right when I turned 40. So all of this was happening. I had already lost everything. I think this preceded that. I'm going to be in that 72 hours of going into the dark night of the soul. But I went to India and went to Varanasi. And if you don't know what Varanasi is, it's a place where many Hindus believe if you die there, your karma will be removed. It's said to be the oldest inhabited city in the world. Over 10,000 years, people have lived in this city, and it's on the bank of the Ganges. And every night at sundown, there's the Aarti Festival of Lights. And my friend had told me, if you're a spiritually sensitive person, you're going to feel the energy. So I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. Right. So I won't give the whole story. I write about it in one of my books, but we get to Varanasi, and I started feeling this tingling sensation going up my arm. And as we moved into the city, my heart just started pouring open. And we went out onto the boat on the Ganges and looked back at the Aarti festival. And suddenly, this was like, it couldn't be scripted. Suddenly, all the power went out, which is not uncommon in India. There's a lot of that, especially back then. The only thing lighting up the sky was the Aarti festival and the bodies burning on the river. And I just had this experience where my heart opened, and I literally knew there was only love, and everything was pixelated, and I could not possibly see the difference between the two of us. We were all one. And we ended up sort of coasting over to where the bodies were burning and just docked there. And I was 6 feet away from watching this body burn. And I had this profound experience of my ego literally being removed for a period of time. Now, what I want to say about that is, what I would love to say is, my ego's never come back, David. But the truth is, and I didn't know it until years later, I had a permanent shift in my relationship to it. I realize now that what we call ego or personality, or, this idea that you're saying of the doer, that's all a beautiful part of who we are. But it's not, it's what I have, not who I am. So let me correct the way I said that. Not a beautiful part of who we are, a beautiful part of what we have. And I realize that the truth of who we are is this energy, this frequency, and this personality that we have can then become a delivery system for it.
Mhm.
And then that maybe 6 months later, sometime later, was when I had this period of the dark night of the soul where I realized I needed to feel all of that so that I could have really a permanent shift.
Mhm, mhm. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I wanna get into movie,
Yeah.
right? MOVIE. First step in conscious creation is making peace with the past, making peace with the past. Okay, so why is that important? Because 'Cause I'm trying to create something new. I'm trying to get rid of my past. I'm not trying to, focus on the past. Why is that the first step?
Because simply said, if I don't heal the past, I'm bringing it with me everywhere. So it goes back to the analogy of the painting. Sorry to use a metaphor and a metaphor. We're already talking about a movie. Now we're talking about a portrait or a painting. But the idea that if I don't make peace with my past, which to me is very, I used to call it forgiveness. And first of all, FUVI is not a great acronym, but forgiveness is so loaded with the idea of good, bad, right, wrong, that I started asking myself, can I make peace with everything that's happened without needing to say it was okay or not okay? That's that mystical consciousness where it's like, this thing happened. Yes, it was horrific, but we've created a paradigm in our culture where I have to wait for the person to acknowledge it and say they were wrong, and then somehow I'm supposed to feel better. But it doesn't work, right? Even though I can wait for years or decades. I mean, I've worked with clients who can't forgive someone and they're no longer even alive. They're not going to ever apologize. They're not going to ever own their part. So, how do I make peace with that? So, simply said, if I don't make peace with the past, it's going to be creating everything today because it's still unresolved within me.
I have heard people that I have interviewed say about things that we experience is nothing is right, nothing is wrong. It just is. It just happened.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me, because of my programming with Christianity, it's like, no, 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 no. There's a clear right and a clear wrong.
Yes.
Like, how can things just be as they are? Like horrific things, right, in our world. How do you process that if I've had something horrific that either has been done to me or perhaps horrific things that I have done to others? How do I
Yes.
make peace with all of that?
Well, you are speaking to something that's so important because, in my experience, the only thing more difficult than making peace with something that's happened to me is making peace with something I've done. And we're going to actually get to that when we get to the O step. So I'll kind of bookmark that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And again, the only way to talk about it is in paradox. So if I'm looking at it through these four levels of consciousness, if I'm in the things happen to me phase, of course I can never possibly make peace unless the person makes it right. Of course, I can never move beyond the things I've done to harm others. As we move to these different levels of consciousness, and I want to be really careful how I talk about this. So I want everyone to like really take a breath and hear me. When we reach this other level of consciousness, we move beyond the idea of good, bad, right, wrong, but we're not doing the spiritual bypass of pretending like it didn't hurt. It's very important. I would never want to say to myself or someone else that sexual trauma you experienced was the best thing that ever happened to you because it made you who you are. No, we're not doing that. It was painful. It was difficult. It was something that hurt you very much. We're going to look at that wound and we're going to tend to that wound and then we're going to make peace with that. When we make peace with that, we can start to realize that it is beyond good, bad, right, wrong. It doesn't mean that it was okay. We're not even necessarily letting someone off the hook. But the only way we can truly forgive or truly make peace is a shift in consciousness. It's not about what happened, it's about what I decided and what I absorbed, and that I can actually heal.
Mhm. It almost seems like I'm looking at, I don't know, this, pair of scissors, and I'm looking at it from this direction, like one level of consciousness, and I can see all of the red and the gray and the length here. But then if I change my perspective and go, well, what if I look at the situation from this perspective? It looks completely different. I mean, it looks like a completely different thing as you're talking about, but the ability to shift from this to this, but that really requires some sort of breakthrough, either therapy or healing or the divine perspective shift, what you're talking about. Okay, so making peace with the past, number one, that's the first step. The second, overcoming core false beliefs. Overcoming core false beliefs. So what is a false belief, and how do I even identify those when they seem very true? They seem very real. It's like, what do you mean false? This is reality for me.
Yeah, and that's why I add the word false, because a lot of people talk about core beliefs, but I call them core false beliefs because I want to acknowledge they're lies that we've picked up about ourselves, often, quite often, before our brains were even developed. So my 7-year-old decided I was unworthy and unlovable, as we already discussed. That became not only a thought that I needed to change, but a frequency that I needed to like start to question and heal. We can overcome core false beliefs. I used to say remove them or let go of core false beliefs, but rather than the idea that I need to let go of them, I need to look at the lie that they are. Now, how do we know they're false? Because if I really believe I'm unlovable, there's a very simple way I frame it. We're kind of going back to the levels of consciousness, because at the mystical level of consciousness, we wouldn't even look at the lie we're carrying as anything wrong. We're just going to ask, what does it create? Right. And I'll tell you, you pointed to something that is so important, and that is the harm I've caused others. And I have caused plenty of harm in the world. I shared with you some of it, right? I've done all sorts of things that have caused harm. I realized something so simple, and that is anytime I believed I was unlovable, I acted that way in the world. Anytime I believed I was broken, I acted that way in the world. As I tapped into this higher possibility for my life and realized love is who I am, I acted that way in the world. It became so profoundly simple. Anything other than love or source or infinite effervescence, if you will, is a lie that we have about ourselves. It's a limitation. Rumi says we're not here to seek for love, but to look at the barriers we put on top of it. That's what we're talking about here.
Mm, powerful. Okay, overcoming false beliefs. The third is visioning. Now, uh, in the process of manifesting, we're often taught to visualize what we want. How is visualization different than what you're talking about with visioning?
Completely different. And I always want to give credit where credit's due. I use Michael Beckwith's life visioning process, absolutely incredible and life changing. Um, Visualization, as you said, is what do I want to create and how do I hold that picture in my mind? That's vision boards. They're really visualization boards, but we call them vision boards. Visioning is to the best of our ability to empty our mind, to move beyond preconceived ideas, which again is why it's important that we do the making peace with the past and overcoming the core false beliefs. Because if I believe I'm broken or if I believe I'm unlovable, I might put on my vision board the perfect partner because then that'll heal that, right? That's the unconscious idea. As we make peace with that and we become, if you will, an empty vessel, we can tap into visioning, which is a divine idea that comes from deep within us. And, there have probably been hour-long shows on how we know something is a thought or an intuition. But for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to say, I'm guessing we know it when we know it. And so visioning is about quieting, and I don't mean quieting the mind. I just mean like letting the mind be what it is, letting it move, tapping into and becoming very receptive to a series of questions. And again, I'm using Michael Beckwith's questions that one asks in the visioning process. And I lay it all out in my book and in my workbook. But essentially, you ask a series of questions and listen to intuition and let it guide you.
Beautiful. Making peace with the past, overcoming false beliefs, visioning. Fourth step is you encourage us to focus on intention setting, which is what you said most of us begin with. And I'm curious how you would even differentiate between goal setting and intention setting. What's the difference there?
Yeah, I only use the word, well, again, the acronym, the I is much better than a G. So could
Moved
just
you.
say
Moved you.
that. But goals, I think, it's sort of like forgiveness, or even God. That's like a loaded word in our culture that mean a lot of different things. So goals has this idea of like, I'm going to make it happen. It seems like it's a little bit in that magical thinking, where intention is like, no, I'm going to listen intently to that inner wisdom. I'm going to let that guide me. I've allowed myself to sit with this vision for a while, and then I create intentions from that. So I think, to me, even though it might be semantics, there's a different energy to goals and intentions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm definitely that goal. The thought of a goal in our culture is go after it, grind it out, make it
Yeah,
happen. Yeah, where the intention feels more. I was just going to say embodying, but that's the last step.
that's
Look
the
at that.
last one. We'll
Look
get
at
to
that.
it.
Okay,
Right.
embodying your vision. That is the final step. So, what does that involve?
Well, let me say something about intention setting, because this is where we do get really practical. This is where we do engage the mind. And in my journey, around that time, I had that shift, that dark night of the soul. I reached out to my good friend Gregory Spencer, and who has been financially, for one thing, just wildly successful. He built his own business, and I wanted to know how he did it. And he said, I'm glad you asked. And he uses this very simple formula. Now, I've added the making peace, the overcoming core false beliefs, and the visioning, but the intention setting, and I've been doing this for, I think, about 15 years, and I'll say religiously because it's true. We set intentions based on the vision that we receive. And this is a model that a lot of people use. This is not anything that different, but it's specific, it's measurable, it's realistic, but it's a stretch. We've all used that. But the key to it, to me, is we set intentions based on the vision we're getting. And for me, I set, usually now it's annual. So I'll be doing that this time of year to set my intentions for the year. And then the key that I think is really something that gives this such practicality is then I create 10 action steps every single week that point to those intentions. And I have an accountability partner. And in my case, it's my friend Gregory, and I email him on or before Monday morning. how many I've done. I did 7 out of 10. I roll those 3 over and I create 7 more. There's something that's so practical about that. And honestly, it has completely changed my life because it went from, oh, I should email that person to I just emailed that person.
Mhm.
And in some ways, that's, it's very, very simple and very, very practical, but that has been life changing. Now, the embodying one, the last step is, and a lot of us are familiar with this, it's kind of what we talk about a little bit in the law of attraction. We hold the energy of that which we want to create, right? So we kind of act as if, but it's way deeper than that because remember, we're talking about life being energy and frequency. So we're tuning into the infinite possibilities and we tune into what it is that we are intending as if it's already here. And then that becomes not only magnetic, but as I said earlier, then I can make different choices.
Mhm. Yeah, that is so powerful. The embodying your vision. I know for me, when I'm creating something, it's like I see it. I see it already in the world. It's very clear. I see people interacting with it. I see people having fun. People see people's lives being changed by it. And the more clear that vision is, the more it's like, no, 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 this is going to happen. I don't know how big of an impact it's going to be, but like it's going to happen. You know.
And one thing you just said that I think is so important, and this is what has worked for me when all else has not worked, that is remembering the purpose and how it will serve others.
Yes.
Because for me, when I get to that mystical level of consciousness, it's always about some kind of service. You ask the question at the very beginning of our conversation, how did I come to being of service this way in the world? And it's like that's like oxygen for me now, right? Because it's like I want to make a difference on planet Earth. I'm not here to save the world, but I want to be here to serve the paradigm of possibility, right? And so embodying that is always going back to that vision. And as you said, who gets helped, who gets served, experiencing in my mind and in my energy field someone receiving, like if I'm writing one of my 3 books, it's like someone will read this page and it will help them shift. And
Mhm.
when I tune into that purpose, then I get out of my mind of like how it's supposed to manifest or exactly how it's supposed to be, and I remind myself of that, and then that frequency is what we end up radiating.
I love the shift that I utilize in my own life and share with people is the shift from performance to service. Is if I'm in that place of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have this conversation with TJ. Hopefully, I hope he likes me. I hope I ask the right questions. I hope, oh my God, it's going to be, I don't know, I don't know. It's like, that's performance. I'm trying to perform for you, perform for others. When I set that aside and go, no, no, I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve you. I'm here to serve our listeners. Right. Then it just feels like I can relax into that because it is, obviously you have to prepare for whatever it is. But when it comes from that heart of service, people can feel that difference. It
It's
feels so
infectious.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's twofold, right? And thank you for saying all of that because I feel that from you, absolutely. And that felt sense is what we're talking about here. And people will want to watch this because we both intended that. That's just the way it is, right? But not only that, not only that, it's like, yes, that's true. And then I'm making very different choices because when I'm in the performing, I might still be in a core false belief that I have to prove something. And I'm definitely talking about myself now, because I believed I was unworthy. I wanted to look really worthy to the outside world. And so that ego-based reality, there's nothing wrong with it, but it creates a limitation. And what it created for me is like, oh, I just got what I thought was going to make me happy. It didn't change anything.
Oh my God.
When I'm in the service, it's like, oh my gosh, like I just did a speaking event in Sonoma a few days ago, and there was a person there who now works helping others, but she was a client of mine at a treatment program years ago. And she said, "You saved my life." And I know that's not true because I know she saved her own. One I'm speaking to, though, is like, oh my gosh, that did make a difference. That presence did make a difference. And we don't always know the difference we've made, but there's something about knowing that is, yes, that's the deeper why.
And I think in that moment, the word that comes to mind for me is alignment. Is like feels like, oh my gosh, I'm so aligned in this moment. It feels so good. It feels so good. Yeah. You write in conscious creation, what is the most rewarding result of the conscious creation process? It is living an awakened life.
Mm.
Awakened living is fundamentally simple. It's our natural state. Awakening in its simplest form is waking up from the illusion of separateness. It is waking up from the misconception of fear and scarcity and returning to our original perfection. It is experiencing absolute presence and living in a state of awe and wonder. Wow. Okay, so my question is it possible to experience what you just wrote, what I just read, beyond momentary spiritual mountaintop experiences that, for a lot of us kind of seem to come and go? Like, how do we live in the state of awareness of what I just read?
I had a client ask me once, do you really walk around just only seeing love and feeling connection, awe, and wonder that everything is a gift and life is beautiful? And I said, yes, I do. Sometimes I forget. And when I forget, I just remind myself. So I will say this. I'm not sure if we've come to planet Earth to live that all the time, every single moment, or for some reason we've come here to experience the moments when we do that and when we don't, and then we gently come back to that. It has been said that there have been teachers like Jesus or Buddha or others who live in that state of consciousness, and yet we hear stories about them. Jesus tipped the tables over, right? So he had a moment of anger. So I'm going to guess that like he was like, "Oh, come back," right? And perhaps even there's a place for all of it. And that's where I talked about earlier that we're now entering spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. Maybe this isn't about being rid of the ego. Maybe this isn't about always being in that state. What I will say is I'm there more often than I've ever been. And boy, does it feel wonderful. And boy, does it make a difference in people around me. So I say yes. And maybe being on planet Earth is this experience of the seeming duality. Maybe that's just why we're here.
Mhm. So we've mentioned, obviously, you have the book Conscious Creation, you have the Conscious Creation workbook, which are both on Amazon. You also have an online course called Conscious Creation. Um, how do those three things, if I'm interested in this, I want to dive in, and we've just given people a taste of it. I love the examples that you use of two different individuals that you've known, that you interweave their stories in the book. Um, where would you encourage me to dive in? Should I get the book and the workbook? Should I go to the course? Like, what would you suggest?
Yeah, I think all three are really valid. I mean, when I like to offer people is to get the book and read it, and then if you're someone who really loves writing, the workbook is probably going to be great for you. You'll read the chapter, you'll do the exercises on the book. Some of us are more visual learners. Like I like to watch a video. Like I would learn way more from this podcast than I would from reading the workbook. That's just me personally. So I offer this course. It's on wholehearted.org, which is an amazing resource, but you can also access it through my website. That course is a series of talks that I've given. So I basically do a series of talks on these 5 steps. And then once you see that talk, then you do the exercises that are really pulled right out of the workbook. So it really depends on how you like to access material. The workbook and the course are actually very similar. It just depends on how you like to learn.
And wholehearted.org, we will link directly to your course. Just so people know, it's either $99 for the course or $99 for the year to have kind of all access to all the different courses, which you have several courses on there
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. And Gabor Mate's on there, and other people that are notable have some really high quality. It's very, very professional, high quality material.
Yes.
So beyond conscious creation, which we've talked all about, I just want to give people an opportunity to hear some of the other ways that people can work with you and you can support them.
Yeah, thank you. Conscious recovery. So if you're a person in recovery who wants a more wholeness approach, there's also conscious recovery book, workbook, and course. And then conscious being was my first book, but I kind of see it almost as the third book in the trilogy, which is really about how consciousness creates reality. It's where I dive a little bit more deeply into these 4 stages of consciousness. So the books, the workbooks, I often do speaking events. So if you follow me, you get notified of that, or you can always go on to one of my social media to see my upcoming events, workshops. I might be doing some retreats in the new year, so that will be announced soon as well.
That could be the intention. Retreats.
I haven't done my visioning yet. So we'll see. I'm doing my visioning on the 30th. So we'll see what my intuition tells me and how it guides me.
What is the best place for people to connect with you online?
tjwoodward.com. You can see all my socials there and everything that we've just mentioned.
Awesome. And I encourage people to follow you on Instagram as well. I really love your just even the images are super insightful, the thoughts and the questions. And you kind of alternate between an image and your videos are great. So encourage people to follow you. Instagram, once again, is
tjwoodward_.
okay. There we go. Some other TJ Woodward got that.
They did. And
Dang.
I've offered, I think, to buy it, but nothing's ever come of it.
Yeah, the hard part is
Thanks for watching.
if you're DM somebody like that, they have it and they haven't used it in years, so they'll never get the DM. So it's like,
Oh, yeah. It's
sitting
true.
there. Yeah, yeah. I do want to ask you one last question is as we enter this new year and people are culturally, collectively feeling like, well, I probably should be thinking about the next year in some way. I got to set a goal or something, you know? What is one truth or true belief that you would want to encourage people to embrace as we enter this new season?
I mean, I would just say, sort of to recap our conversation, if you find yourself like many of us do on January 1st, that I have to come up with these New Year's resolutions, pause, reflect on these 5 steps we discussed. Is there something from the past that you want to make peace with? Or is there an idea you have about yourself that you want to overcome? Are you willing to be in the silence? I'm a big proponent somewhere around the first of the year. I always spend an hour in the silence and do the visioning process. Ask my intuition what wants to be revealed in the coming year. And that gives us very different information than trying to figure it all out. So you don't have to do anything, but it is an invitation for you.
Love that. TJ, thank you for what you're doing in the world, man. I just appreciate you and all of the resources you're providing people. I would say I would even appreciate more as I'm just here getting to know you. I probably would appreciate this even more if I was with you in person, but I appreciate your presence.
Oh,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
your beingness for what you're doing. So thank you so much. Great to be with you.
Well, and thank you. I want to say thank you too for having Awaken Magazine. I've been following it for some time, and like my friend Sue Mortar's on there, a few other people you have been on the cover. So thank you for your yes, because I know what it's like to have a vision and follow through with it. So I just want to thank you for all the amazing work you're doing in the world as well.